William had always been a punctual man. Every morning at exactly 7:15 he would leave his small apartment on Maple Street and walk the same route to his job at the hardware store. His neighbors knew his schedule better than their own. Mrs. Henderson would wave from her kitchen window as he passed, and old Mr. Garcia would already be watering his roses in the front yard. But this particular Tuesday morning felt different. William woke up with an unusual heaviness in his chest, though he couldn't explain why. The weather was pleasant enough, with soft sunlight filtering through his bedroom curtains. He went through his usual routine of making coffee, reading the morning paper, and checking his watch 3 times before heading out. As he walked down Maple Street, William noticed something odd. Kate Morrison, who lived in the blue house with white shutters, was standing on her front porch. This wasn't unusual by itself, but Kate looked distressed. Her auburn hair was slightly messy, and she kept wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself despite the warm morning air. William had known Kate for about 5 years, ever since she moved to the neighborhood after her divorce. She was a quiet woman who worked as a school librarian and kept a beautiful garden that was the envy of everyone on the street. They exchanged polite greetings when their paths crossed, but they weren't what anyone would call close friends. What struck William as strange was that Kate seemed to be staring at something across the street. Her face was pale and her hands were trembling slightly. She didn't even notice when William approached her front gate. "Kate?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Is everything all right?" She turned toward him with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment she seemed unable to speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "William, I think something terrible has happened." Following her gaze, William looked across the street at the yellow house where the elderly Brennan couple lived. The house looked normal from the outside. The lawn was neatly trimmed, and Mrs. Brennan's prized rose bushes were blooming beautifully along the front fence. But something felt wrong. "I haven't seen them in 3 days," Kate continued, her voice shaking. "Mrs. Brennan always waters her roses every morning at 8. She's never missed a day in the 2 years I've lived here. And yesterday their newspaper is still on the front step." William frowned, now sharing Kate's concern. The Brennans were in their 80s, and while they were generally healthy and active for their age, anything could happen. Mr. Brennan had mentioned having some heart problems the last time they spoke. "Have you tried knocking on their door?" William asked. Kate shook her head. "I keep meaning to, but what if—" She trailed off, unable to voice her fears. William understood. Nobody wanted to be the one to discover bad news. But someone had to check on the elderly couple. The neighborhood had an unspoken agreement to look out for each other, especially for the older residents. "Let's go together," William suggested gently. "I'm sure they're fine. Maybe they went to visit their son in the next town and forgot to mention it." Kate nodded, though she didn't look convinced. They walked across the street together, their footsteps seeming unnaturally loud on the quiet morning sidewalk. As they got closer to the Brennan house, William noticed more troubling details. The mail slot was overflowing with letters and advertisements. A milk bottle from 3 days ago was still sitting on the front step, the contents spoiled and sour-smelling in the heat. The front door was painted a cheerful red color that Mrs. Brennan had chosen just last spring. She had been so excited about it, telling everyone who would listen that red doors brought good luck and happiness to a home. Now, that same red door seemed ominous as William raised his hand to knock. The sound echoed hollow through the house. They waited, listening for any sound of movement inside. Nothing. William knocked again, harder this time, calling out, "Mr. Brennan? Mrs. Brennan? It's William from across the street." Still no response. Kate wrapped her arms around herself more tightly. "Maybe we should call the police," she whispered. But William had already noticed something that made his heart skip. The door wasn't properly closed. There was a tiny gap where it hadn't latched completely. In a neighborhood where people were careful about security, this was highly unusual. The Brennans always locked their door even during the day. "Kate," William said quietly, "I think the door is open." She stepped closer and saw what he meant. The gap was barely visible, but it was there. William placed his hand on the door handle and looked at Kate. She nodded, understanding that they had to see what was inside. "Mr. Brennan?" William called out once more as he slowly pushed the door open. "We're coming in to check on you." The wang door swung open with a soft creak, and William stepped into the front hallway of the Brennan house. The first thing he noticed was how still everything was. The house had an unnatural quiet to it, the kind of silence that feels heavy and wrong. As his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light inside, William's breath caught in his throat. What he saw in the living room beyond would change everything, and Kate's reaction when she saw it too would be something neither of them would ever forget. The living room was a disaster. Furniture was overturned, picture frames lay shattered on the floor, and Mrs. Brennan's collection of porcelain figurines was scattered in pieces across the carpet. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the corner, near the fireplace, Mr. Brennan sat slumped in his favorite armchair, completely motionless. William's first instinct was to rush forward, but something made him pause. There was blood on Mr. Brennan's shirt, and his skin had a grayish color that William had seen only once before, when his own father had passed away. Kate appeared beside him in the doorway, and let out a sharp gasp that seemed to echo through the destroyed room. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "Is he?" William nodded grimly. There was no doubt that Mr. Brennan was dead, and from the looks of the room, this hadn't been from natural causes. Someone had broken into the house, and the elderly man had likely tried to defend himself and his wife. But where was Mrs. Brennan as, if reading his thoughts, Kate grabbed his arm. "Where's Eleanor?" she whispered, using Mrs. Brennan's first name. "William, where is she?" That's when they heard it. A faint sound coming from somewhere deeper in the house. It was so quiet that they almost missed it, but it was definitely there. A soft whimpering, like someone trying to cry without making noise. William felt his heart pounding as he motioned for Kate to stay behind him. They moved carefully through the living room, stepping around the broken glass and overturned furniture. The sound was coming from the direction of the kitchen, and as they got closer it became clearer. Someone was alive in this house. The kitchen was in similar disarray. Drawers had been pulled out and emptied, cabinet doors hung open, and there were food items scattered across the floor. But the whimpering sound was coming from the pantry, a small closet-like space where Mrs. Brennan stored her canned goods and baking supplies. William approached the pantry door slowly. It was closed, but not locked. He could hear movement inside, now shuffling sounds like someone trying to shift position in a cramped space. "Mrs. Brennan?" he called softly. "Eleanor, are you in there? It's William from across the street. You're safe now." The sound stopped immediately, as if whoever was inside was holding their breath. Then, after a long moment, came a voice so weak and frightened that it broke William's heart. "William, is it really you?" "Yes, Eleanor. I'm here with Kate. We're going to get you out of there." William tried the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Looking closer, he realized that something heavy had been pushed against it from the inside. Mrs. Brennan had barricaded herself in the pantry. "Eleanor, I need you to move away from the door so I can open it," William said gently. "You're safe now. Whatever happened is over." They could hear her moving around inside, the sound of cans and boxes being shifted. After a few minutes, she called out weakly, "Okay, try now." William opened the door carefully, and what he saw made Kate burst into tears behind him. Mrs. Brennan was huddled in the corner of the small pantry, surrounded by fallen food items. Her clothes were torn, her gray hair was disheveled, and there were bruises on her arms and face. But she was alive. "Eleanor," Kate whispered, pushing past William to kneel beside the elderly woman. "Oh, Eleanor, what happened to you?" Mrs. Brennan looked up with eyes full of terror and confusion. She seemed to have trouble focusing, as if she wasn't quite sure what was real anymore. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and broken. "They came in the middle of the night," she said. "Two men. They said they knew we kept money in the house. Frank tried to stop them, but he's not young anymore. Neither of us are." William felt sick to his stomach. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that the Brennans were trusting people who sometimes kept cash at home instead of always going to the bank. It was an old-fashioned habit that had made them targets. They hurt Frank, Mrs. Brennan continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. I tried to help him, but one of the men pushed me down. Frank told me to run to hide, so I came in here and pushed the shelves against the door. I've been here for 2 days, afraid to come out. Kate was crying openly now, her hands shaking, as she gently touched Mrs. Brennan's arm. You're safe now, she kept repeating. You're safe. But William was thinking about practical matters. They needed to call the police immediately, and Mrs. Brennan needed medical attention. She had been trapped in that small space for 2 days without proper food or water, and at her age, that could be dangerous. Eleanor, we need to get you to a hospital, William said. And we need to call the police. Can you walk? Mrs. Brennan tried to stand but immediately became dizzy and would have fallen if Kate hadn't caught her. It was clear that she was dehydrated and weak from her ordeal. William pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911. As he explained the situation to the dispatcher, he watched Kate help Mrs. Brennan slowly make her way out of the pantry and into the kitchen. The elderly woman kept looking around fearfully as if expecting the intruders to return at any moment. They're coming, William told them after hanging up. Both the police and an ambulance. They should be here in a few minutes. Mrs. Brennan nodded weakly, but then something seemed to occur to her. She grabbed Kate's hand with surprising strength. There's something else, she whispered. Something they don't know. Frank and I, we saw them clearly. I know who they are. Kate and William exchanged shocked glances. If Mrs. Brennan could identify the people who had done this terrible thing, it would mean the difference between the criminals getting away with murder and them being brought to justice. Eleanor, you sure? Kate asked gently. It was dark, and you must have been very frightened. Mrs. Brennan nodded firmly, and for the first time since they found her, she looked more angry than afraid. I'm sure. One of them was Tommy Martinez from 3 blocks over. I've known that boy since he was 10 years old. His grandmother Rosa brings me vegetables from her garden every summer. William felt his stomach drop. He knew Tommy Martinez too. The young man was 22 now and had been in and out of trouble with the law since he was a teenager. But William had never imagined he would do something this violent, especially to an elderly couple who had never hurt anyone. The other one was older, Mrs. Brennan continued. I didn't recognize him, but Tommy called him Uncle Mike during the whole thing. They kept arguing about how much money we were supposed to have hidden in the house. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. William felt relieved that help was coming, but he was also worried about what would happen next. If Mrs. Brennan was right about Tommy Martinez being involved, it would devastate his grandmother Rosa, who was a sweet woman who had tried her best to keep Tommy on the right path. Kate helped Mrs. Brennan sit down in one of the kitchen chairs that hadn't been knocked over. The elderly woman was getting stronger now that she was out of the cramped pantry, but she still looked fragile and traumatized. Eleanor, when the police get here, you need to tell them exactly what you just told us, William said, even if it's hard to talk about. Mrs. Brennan nodded, but then her face crumpled as the full reality of her situation hit her again. Frank is really gone, isn't he? She whispered. I keep thinking maybe I dreamed it all, that maybe he's just sleeping in his chair like he does after lunch sometimes. Kate knelt beside her and took her hands. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. Frank fought to protect you. He loved you so much. The sirens were getting louder now, and soon they could see flashing lights through the kitchen window. William went to the front door to meet the emergency responders, leaving Kate to comfort Mrs. Brennan. 3 police cars and an ambulance pulled up outside the Brennan house. Neighbors began appearing on their porches and in their yards, drawn by the commotion. William saw Mrs. Henderson from across the street, her face pale with worry. Old Mr. Garcia was standing by his roses, shaking his head sadly. The first police officer through the door was Detective Sarah Chen, a woman in her 40s who William recognized from a neighborhood watch meeting they had attended last year. She took one look at the destroyed living room and immediately radioed for the crime scene team. Sir, I need you to step outside while we secure the scene, Detective Chen told William. Is anyone else in the house? Yes, Mrs. Brennan is alive. She's in the kitchen with my neighbor Kate. She's been hiding in the pantry for 2 days. Her husband. William gestured toward the living room, unable to finish the sentence. Detective Chen nodded grimly and called for the paramedics to come inside. Within minutes, the house was full of police officers and medical personnel, all working efficiently to process the scene and take care of Mrs. Brennan. William and Kate found themselves standing on the front lawn, watching as Mrs. Brennan was carefully helped into the ambulance. She looked so small and frail on the stretcher, but she managed to wave at them before the ambulance doors closed. She's going to be okay physically, one of the paramedics told them. But this kind of trauma, it's going to take time for her to heal emotionally. After the ambulance left, Detective Chen approached William and Kate. She had her notepad out and was ready to take their statements about how they had discovered the scene. Tell me everything, starting from when you first became concerned about the Brennans, she said. They explained about noticing that Mrs. Brennan hadn't been watering her roses, about the accumulated mail and the spoiled milk, and about finding the front door slightly open. Detective Chen listened carefully and took detailed notes. Mrs. Brennan told us she recognized one of the attackers, Kate said. A young man named Tommy Martinez who lives in the neighborhood. Detective Chen's expression became more serious. Did she seem certain about this identification? Very certain, William replied. She said she's known him since he was a child. She also mentioned that the other man was someone Tommy called Uncle Mike. Detective Chen finished writing and closed her notepad. We'll follow up on this information immediately. In the meantime, I need both of you to come to the station later today to give formal statements. This is going to be a murder investigation, and your testimony about discovering the scene will be important. As the police finished their work and began to leave, William and Kate walked slowly back across the street. The normal routine of the morning seemed like it had happened days ago, instead of just a few hours. William realized he had never made it to work, and he would need to call his boss to explain what had happened. But there was something else bothering him, something that made him feel uneasy, even though they had found Mrs. Brennan alive and she was now safe in the hospital. Kate, he said as they reached her front porch, what if Tommy Martinez figures out that Mrs. Brennan can identify him? What if he tries to hurt her before the police can arrest him? Kate's face went pale at William's words. She hadn't thought about that possibility, but now that he mentioned it, the fear was obvious and real. If Tommy Martinez was desperate enough to kill an elderly man during a robbery, he might be desperate enough to try to silence the only witness who could identify him. Do you think we should call Detective Chen? Kate asked, her voice shaking slightly. William nodded. I think we should. Mrs. Brennan needs protection, at least until they arrest Tommy and this Uncle Mike person. As William pulled out his phone to call the detective, they noticed a commotion down the street. A police car had pulled up in front of the Martinez house, and officers were walking toward the front door. Word traveled fast in their neighborhood, and it seemed the police were already following up on Mrs. Brennan's identification. They watched as Rosa Martinez, Tommy's grandmother, answered the door. Even from 3 blocks away, they could see her, distress when the officers spoke to her. She kept shaking her head and gesturing with her hands, clearly upset by whatever they were telling her. Poor Rosa, Kate murmured. She's tried so hard with that boy. She must be heartbroken. William had finished his call to Detective Chen, who assured him that Mrs. Brennan would have police protection at the hospital. But as he watched the scene at the Martinez house, he felt a growing sense of unease. Kate, what if Tommy isn't home? What if he's already running? As if in answer to his question, they saw the police officers come back out of the Martinez house alone. Rosa Martinez stood in her doorway, crying and talking to the officers. It was clear that Tommy wasn't there. One of the officers got on his radio, and within minutes more police cars began arriving in the neighborhood. The search for Tommy Martinez had begun, but he had a head start. William and Kate spent the rest of the day at the police station, giving their formal statements about discovering the crime scene. Detective Chen asked them dozens of questions about what they had seen and heard, and about their interactions with both the Brennan family and Tommy Martinez over the years. Tommy's grandmother says she hasn't seen him in 3 days, Detective Chen told them. She thought he was staying with friends in the next town over. We're checking with his known associates now, including anyone who might be this Uncle Mike that Mrs. Brennan mentioned. By the time William and Kate returned home that evening, their quiet neighborhood had been transformed. News vans had arrived, drawn by the story of an elderly woman who survived 2 days hiding in a pantry after her husband was murdered during a home invasion. Reporters were interviewing neighbors and asking questions about Tommy Martinez and his family. William felt exhausted as he finally walked into his apartment. The events of the day seemed surreal, like something that happened to other people in other places, not on peaceful Maple Street where the biggest excitement was usually Mrs. Henderson's annual garden party. But as he tried to settle down for the evening, William found himself constantly looking out his windows. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every noise made him jump. He realized that the sense of safety and security he had always felt in his neighborhood was gone, possibly forever. Around 9 o'clock, his phone rang. It was Kate, and she sounded frightened. "William, I think someone is watching my house," she whispered into the phone. "There's a car parked at the end of the street that I don't recognize, and I saw someone standing under the streetlight about an hour ago, just looking at the houses." William immediately went to his front window and looked out. Sure enough, there was an unfamiliar dark sedan parked near the corner with 2 people sitting inside. As he watched, one of them got out and began walking slowly down the sidewalk, looking at each house as he passed. "Kate, call the police right now," William said. "I'm going to keep watching from my window." The man walking down the street was young and had the build and walk that William remembered from seeing Tommy Martinez around the neighborhood. But it was dark, and William couldn't be completely sure. What he was sure of was that this person was clearly looking for something or someone. When the man reached Kate's house, he stopped and stared at it for a long time. Then he looked across the street at William's apartment building. Even in the dim light from the street lamps, William could see that the man was agitated and nervous. The sound of sirens approaching made the man quickly retreat to the dark sedan, which drove away before the police arrived. But William had gotten a good look at the license plate, and he gave the number to the responding officers. Detective Chen arrived 20 minutes later, looking tired but alert. She listened to William's description of what he had seen and took down the license plate number. "We'll check this out immediately," she said, "but I want both of you to be extra careful over the next few days. We don't know if Tommy Martinez is still in the area, or if he knows that you two were the ones who found Mrs. Brennan. He might see you as threats to his freedom." The detective arranged for increased police patrols in their neighborhood and gave both William and Kate her direct phone number to call if they saw anything else suspicious. After Detective Chen left, William couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. Tommy Martinez was still free, and if he was desperate enough to come back to the neighborhood where he had committed murder, he was probably desperate enough to do anything to protect himself. As William finally tried to go to sleep that night, he made sure all his doors and windows were securely locked. But sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of red doors and frightened elderly women hiding in dark spaces, waiting for help that might come too late. William woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of breaking glass. His heart immediately started racing as he remembered the events of the previous day. He lay still in his bed, listening carefully to determine where the sound had come from. There, it was again. The unmistakable sound of glass breaking, and it was coming from somewhere very close to his building. William got up quietly and crept to his bedroom window, being careful not to turn on any lights that might alert someone to his presence. Looking out, he could see that one of the windows in Kate's house had been broken. There was a dark figure, moving around in her backyard, trying to get inside through the broken window. William's blood ran cold as he realized that Kate was in serious danger. He immediately called Detective Chen's direct number while grabbing his clothes. She answered on the second ring, sounding instantly alert despite the early hour. "Detective, this is William. Someone is breaking into Kate's house right now. I can see them from my window." "I'm sending units immediately," Detective Chen said. "Do not go outside, William. Stay in your apartment and keep watching. Can you see if Kate is okay?" William looked across at Kate's house more carefully. Most of the windows were dark, but he could see a light on in what he knew was her upstairs bedroom. As he watched, that light suddenly went out. Either Kate had turned it off herself, or someone else had turned it off for her. The bedroom light just went out, William reported to Detective Chen. I don't know if she's hiding or if someone got to her. Officers are 2 minutes away, Detective Chen assured him. Keep me on the line and tell me everything you see. The figure in Kate's backyard had successfully gotten through the broken window and was now inside the house. William could see lights turning on and off in different rooms as the intruder moved through the house, clearly searching for something or someone. Then William heard something that made his heart stop. Even through the closed windows of his apartment and across the street, he could hear Kate screaming. It was a sound of pure terror, and it lasted only a few seconds before being abruptly cut off. Detective, someone is hurting Kate, William shouted into the phone. I can hear her screaming. Your officers need to get here now. They're pulling. Onto your street right now, Detective Chen said. I can hear their sirens. Indeed, William could see the flashing lights approaching, but as the police cars turned onto Maple Street, all the lights in Kate's house suddenly went dark. The intruder had seen them coming. 3 police cars surrounded Kate's house, and officers quickly positioned themselves at all the exits. William watched anxiously as they used a bullhorn to call out to whoever was inside. This is the police. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. Nothing happened for several long minutes. Then the front door of Kate's house opened, slowly, and a figure emerged with hands raised. Even in the flashing police lights, William could see that it was indeed Tommy Martinez. He looked desperate and frightened, and he kept looking around as if hoping to find an escape route that didn't exist. The police quickly arrested Tommy, handcuffing him and putting him in one of the patrol cars. But William's relief was short-lived, because he realized that Kate hadn't come out of the house yet. Detective, he said into the phone. They got Tommy, but where is Kate? Why hasn't she come outside? The officers are going into the house now to check on her, Detective Chen replied. William, I need you to stay on the line with me until we know she's safe. William watched as several officers entered Kate's house with their weapons drawn and flashlights ready. The wait seemed to last forever, though it was probably only a few minutes. Finally, one of the officers came back outside and spoke into his radio. Even from across the street, William could see the tension in the officers' body language, and he knew that something was seriously wrong. Detective Chen, came the officer's voice over the radio, which William could hear through his phone connection. We need paramedics immediately. The victim is unconscious and has sustained injuries. She's alive but barely responsive. William felt sick to his stomach. Kate had been hurt because of what they had witnessed, because she had been brave enough to help him check on the Brennan house. If they hadn't found Mrs. Brennan, if they hadn't been able to identify Tommy Martinez, Kate would be safe in her bed right now instead of fighting for her life. The ambulance arrived quickly, and William watched helplessly as paramedics worked on Kate inside her house before carefully carrying her out on a stretcher. She looked so pale and still that William feared the worst. Detective Chen had arrived on the scene and was coordinating the investigation. After Kate was taken to the hospital, she came across the street to talk to William. She's going to be okay, Detective Chen said, though her expression was grim. She has a concussion and some bruises, but the paramedics think she'll make a full recovery. Tommy Martinez was apparently looking for something in her house, probably anything that might connect him to the Brennan murder. What was he looking for? William asked. We're not sure yet. But when we arrested him, he was carrying Mrs. Brennan's jewelry box, the one that was taken from the Brennan house during the robbery. He probably thought Kate had seen it or knew something about it. William felt a surge of anger toward Tommy Martinez. The young man had already killed an elderly man and traumatized his wife, and now he had hurt Kate, an innocent woman whose only crime was caring about her neighbors. Will this be enough to convict him? William asked. Detective Chen nodded. Between Mrs. Brennan's identification, the stolen jewelry in his possession, and now the attack on Kate, we have a very strong case. Tommy Martinez is going to prison for a very long time. As the sun began to rise over Maple Street, William looked at the Brennan house with its crime scene tape and at Kate's house with its broken window and signs of the violent break-in. The peaceful neighborhood he had known and loved was forever changed. But there was one more shock waiting for him, something that would make him understand just how much danger he and Kate had actually been in. 3 days later, William was visiting Kate in the hospital when Detective Chen arrived with news that would change everything they thought they knew about the case. Kate was sitting up in bed, looking much better than she had when the paramedics took her away. The doctors said she would be able to go home in another day or two, once they were sure there were no complications from her concussion. She still had bruises on her face and arms, but her spirits were surprisingly good. "I'm just grateful to be alive," she had told William earlier. "And I'm grateful that Mrs. Brennan is safe. That's what matters most." Detective Chen knocked on the hospital room door and came in looking serious. She had a thick file folder with her and sat down in the chair beside Kate's bed. "I have some news about the case that I think you both need to hear," she said. "We've been questioning Tommy Martinez since we arrested him, and what he told us changes everything." William felt his stomach tighten. He had thought the case was straightforward. Tommy and his uncle Mike had broken into the Brennan house to rob them, killed Mr. Brennan when he tried to resist, and then Tommy had come back to hurt Kate when he thought she might have evidence against him. "Tommy Martinez didn't kill Frank Brennan," Detective Chen said quietly. Kate gasped, and William stared at the detective in confusion. "But Mrs. Brennan identified him. She said she was certain it was Tommy." "She was right that Tommy was there," Detective Chen explained. "But according to Tommy, he never wanted anyone to get hurt. He says his Uncle Mike, whose real name is Michael Torres, was the one who killed Mr. Brennan. Tommy claims he tried to stop it from happening." William felt confused and angry. "So he's trying to blame everything on this other man to save himself?" "That's what I thought at first," Detective Chen said. "But then we found Michael Torres and he confirmed Tommy's story. Sort of." The detective opened her file folder and pulled out several photographs. Michael Torres is 45 years old and has a long criminal record. He's also Tommy's mother's boyfriend, not really his uncle. Torres admits to killing Frank Brennan, but he claims it was self-defense. Kate leaned forward in her hospital bed. Self-defense? An elderly man in his 80s? According to Torres, Frank Brennan had a gun and was trying to shoot them. Torres says he had to fight him for the gun and it went off during the struggle, killing Mr. Brennan. William shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. If it was self-defense, why didn't they call the police? Why did they ransack the house and steal things?" "That's exactly what I asked them," Detective Chen said. "And that's when the real story came out. The reason they targeted the Brennan house specifically wasn't random. Michael Torres used to work for a moving company that helped the Brennans when they downsized from their larger house 5 years ago. He remembered seeing them pack away a lot of valuable items, including what he thought was a significant amount of cash and expensive jewelry." The detective pulled out another photograph, this one showing a small metal box. This is what they were really looking for. Mrs. Brennan's late mother's jewelry collection, which includes several pieces that are worth quite a lot of money. Torres had seen Frank Brennan put this box in a safe during the move, and he spent years planning how to get it. William was trying to process all this information, so it wasn't just a random break-in. They specifically chose the Brennans because Torres knew they had valuable things. Exactly. And here's the part that's going to shock you both. When Tommy Martinez broke into Kate's house 3 nights ago, he wasn't looking for evidence that might connect him to the murder. He was looking for Mrs. Brennan's jewelry box. Kate looked confused. "But why would he think I had it?" Detective Chen pulled out yet another document from her file. "Because Michael Torres told him that you and William must have taken it when you found Mrs. Brennan. Torres convinced Tommy that the only way the police could have known to look for the jewelry was if you two had seen it and reported it." William felt a chill run down his spine. "So Torres sent Tommy to Kate's house to get the jewelry back, thinking we had stolen it ourselves?" "That's right. Tommy Martinez is actually the one who called in an anonymous tip about Torres being involved in the murder. He was trying to save himself, but he was also genuinely horrified by what Torres had done to Frank Brennan. According to Tommy, he only agreed to the robbery because Torres told him it would be easy, that the old couple would just hand over their valuables without any trouble. Kate was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she asked, "What's going to happen to both of them now?" "Michael Torres is being charged with first-degree murder, robbery, and several other felonies. He'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Tommy Martinez is being charged as an accessory to murder and with the assault on Kate. But because he cooperated with our investigation, and because this was his first violent crime, he'll probably get 15 to 20 years. Detective Chen closed her file folder and looked at both William and Kate seriously. "There's something else you both need to know. We found a list in Michael Torres's apartment. It had the names and addresses of 6 elderly couples in this area, including the Brennans. He had been planning similar robberies for months." William felt sick to his stomach. "You mean other people were going to be targeted?" "Were being targeted," Detective Chen corrected. "We found evidence that Torres had already started surveillance on 2 other couples. Your discovery of what happened to the Brennans likely saved other people's lives." The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment, thinking about how differently things could have turned out. If William hadn't noticed that Mrs. Brennan wasn't watering her roses, if he and Kate hadn't been brave enough to check on the elderly couple, Mrs. Brennan might have died in that pantry, and other innocent people would have become victims. Over the next few weeks, as Kate recovered and life in the neighborhood slowly began to return to normal, William often thought about the chain of events that had started with his simple decision to check on his neighbors. The Brennan house remained empty, with a "for sale" sign in the front yard. Mrs. Brennan had decided to move in with her son in the next town, unable to face living in the house where her husband had been killed. But there were positive changes too. The neighborhood watch program that had been mostly inactive for years was revived, with residents taking turns to check on elderly neighbors and keep an eye out for suspicious activity. Mrs. Henderson started a weekly coffee gathering where neighbors could meet and talk, building the kind of connections that might prevent future tragedies. Kate returned home after a week in the hospital, and she and William became close friends. They had been through something together that few people could understand, and they found comfort in talking to each other about their experiences. On a sunny morning, exactly 1 month after they had first knocked on the red door of the Brennan house, William was walking to work when he saw Kate in her front yard, planting new flowers where her window had been broken during Tommy's break-in. "How are you feeling?" he asked, stopping to admire her work. Kate smiled, and for the first time since the whole ordeal began, it was a completely genuine smile. "I'm feeling grateful," she said. "Grateful that we found Mrs. Brennan in time. Grateful that we were able to help catch the people responsible, and grateful that sometimes when terrible things happen, communities can come together and become stronger." William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The peaceful neighborhood they had known was gone forever, replaced by something different but perhaps more meaningful. They had learned that safety wasn't something that just happened, but something that neighbors created together by caring for each other and being willing to act when action was needed. As William continued his walk to work, he thought about Mrs. Brennan now living safely with her son, and about the other elderly couples who would never know how close they had come to becoming victims. He thought about Tommy Martinez, serving his prison sentence and hopefully learning from his terrible mistake, and about Michael Torres, who would spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes. But mostly, he thought about the simple act of knocking on a neighbor's door, and how that single moment of concern and courage had changed everything. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that seem small at the time, like choosing to check on someone when something doesn't seem right, or choosing to care about people we barely know simply because they live nearby and they're human beings who deserve to be safe. The red door of the Brennan house would eventually be painted a different color by its new owners, but William would never forget what he had seen when he opened it that morning, and how Kate's tears of shock and compassion had reminded him that in a world that could sometimes be cruel and frightening, there were still people willing to help, to care, and to do the right thing even when it was difficult and dangerous.